Constructive conservation is a phrase that Historic England have created. My interpretation is really that it means that some level of change, some level potentially of loss of heritage value is acceptable if it conserves and secures the sustainability of the asset as a whole. So one of the big things that we've seen, in many of these mill conversions is the importance of getting occupiers into them. Getting occupiers in is key to the sustainability of them. So if getting an occupier into one of these vacant mill buildings requires some level of loss, some level of adaptation, which may not be ideal from a heritage perspective, then it's worth doing, because the risk is the alternative of prolonged period of vacancy and ultimately a downward spiral of vacancy and dereliction. Ultimately the building could fall down or burn down. So I think constructive conservation is a really important principle that needs to be embodied in the way that both developers and local authorities together look at how these buildings can be repurposed.
Now, money is always important, particularly in these projects. Can you just tell me a little bit about long and short-term funding and tax, how important that is?
Yeah, well, from the perspective of funding, I think it's fair to say that mill regeneration projects don't easily and readily suit the sort of conventional developer funding model, which is all about the rate and the speed of return on the capital employed in the project. Developers want the money in, they want the money out, with X% on top of it as quickly as they can. Now, we know mill projects are often exposed to a completely different risk profile to many other assets. There's a big capital outlay at the beginning. There's sometimes a prolonged period before you get that money back. So as a result of that, there are certain sectors of the developer industry which don't really look at these as priorities. So the question is, how do we get around that? What are the solutions? And we need a more sort of patient form of capital. And we have seen some examples of success. Igloo Developments set up a fund some years ago, which was very much about looking at areas that are up and coming, that they saw the potential for long-term rates of capital growth and overall, and they, as a result of that, invested in a number of projects, including Marshall's Mill in Leeds, which is a great example of how that growth over time, in the context of the uplift of the surrounding area, occurred. So we need to see a bit more long-term funding, to have a more patient approach to those returns. But I think alongside that, I think the public sector is really important to this as well. And we have seen some successes from the likes of the Homes and Communities Agencies, funding regimes where there is sort of recoverable finance, which is made available to developers on the basis of flexible repayment terms. So rather than needing to get that money back straight away, as with most commercial debt, there's sort of prolonged period of repayment linked to actual sales, which has facilitated a number of really good conversions in the Yorkshire area recently as well. So I think in terms of funding, that there are challenges, but there's clearly ways of getting around that as well. Specifically on your question about tax, I think there are some concessions available for mill buildings that are listed, enhanced capital allowances, specifically on refurbishment costs of listed buildings, which can actually result in quite a saving. And there's also the benefit of not having to pay business rates on empty space within a listed building as well. So those are sort of fairly small things that can make quite a difference to kind of enhancing the viability of a project.
And what about this all-important question on relationships? Because funding is important, but relationships, they've got to work well. Can you tell me what the perfect relationship, if it exists, between developer and council and funder, how does it work in this mill setting?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it's very important. I think in my experience, there's some really good practice going on, but probably some not so good practice going on as well. And I think, you know, a lot of these properties do require, you know, some good collaboration. So, I mean, in terms of what that looks like, I mean, I think the first thing is that it needs to go a bit beyond planning. So we need to see a local authority, from the local authority's perspective, taking more of a corporate view and a corporate approach to it, recognising that a mill's refurbishment, repurposing isn't just about planning, it's also about job creation in the local area, or new homes. It's about income generation. It's about a broader enhancement. So I think we need to see more of a corporate approach taken to that relationship. I think from a planning perspective there needs to be a flexible approach taken to that, and I think that there needs to ultimately be a very strong will on both sides, local authority and developer, to want to make something happen. So I think, you know, there are a number of sort of, you know, aspects that sort of characterise success in terms of relationships, but, you know, a will to make it happen is absolutely essential to that.